Hello and welcome to Wild Seat. The movie we're going to break down today is a story full of mischief, betrayal, and of course a toothy sea beast that prefers humans to sushi. Our rabble of friends decide that boredom is not an option on their vacation. Instead of playing cards or tanning like normal people, they opt to steal a couple of jet skis, because of course nothing says fun vacation like a misdemeanor. Here we meet our motley cast: Nat, the thinking head, and therefore the least liked of the group; Tom, Nat's boyfriend whose hobby is playing two-timers with Nat's best friend, Mealy; Tyler, the group's buffoon who thinks his jokes are funnier than they really are; and Gray, the serious guy who will probably wonder every 5 minutes what the hell he's doing there. After a night of heavy partying, they realize they've run out of ethyl fuel, and of course, in their fuzzy, hungover logic, they decide that Nat, the only sober person, should replenish the stock. Because who needs responsibility when you can send someone else? On the way to the bar, Nat decides to pause and call his parents, leaving them a loving message. Maybe he wanted to make sure someone remembered his voice in case he becomes shark bait. And speaking of sharks, he crosses paths with a legless old man who, without further ado, tells him that a great white shark stole his limbs. This encounter with the walking omen leaves Nat a little more than stunned. Can you hear the suspense music in the background yet? Meanwhile, the gang of friends, once again demonstrating their award-winning empathy, decide to go in search of Nat. And when they find her, do they show respect for the old man who lost his legs in a shark attack? Nah. Why would they bother with such trifles? As dawn breaks the next day, our intrepid vacationers wake up with the chickens, ready to squeeze every last drop of fun out of their last day of vacation. As the night looms over them, they are determined to squeeze every last drop out of their youth. Meanwhile, Mealy and Nat are in the midst of "we're best friends forever" talk, completely oblivious to the gruesome plans the boys are hatching. Attention shifts to Greg, who stumbles upon such lonely, unprotected jet skis. You can see the wheels in his brain begin to turn, making the dust squeak. Even though it's still early and there's no support staff, Tom and Tyler, known for their "we don't give a damn" attitude, decide it's a good time for a little unauthorized borrowing. The plan is simple: take a quick ride and get back before they realize the bikes are gone. As a result, they decide to leave their prized smartphones and other personal artifacts on the dock. Nat shows a little common sense and is reluctant, but Greg reassures her with the old "what could possibly go wrong" line. So they climb aboard their borrowed vehicles and set off on an adventure. At first, it's all pure fun and games. The group has a blast, even organizing races on their jet skis, because, you know, nothing says safety like racing stolen vehicles. But as expected, the party comes to an abrupt halt. In the middle of an innocent game of splash, the two jet skis collide, transforming their fun into a scene from ER. Greg ends up with a broken leg so grotesquely it would make a vulture vomit. One of the bikes is reduced to marine junk, and the other decides to play submarine. Remember the phrase, "what could possibly go wrong"? Well, here's what could go wrong, Greg. And without wasting a second, the group moves from unbridled fun to emergency care, trying to do something useful with Greg, who now looks like a broken doll. But oh, what a surprise! The jet ski looks like it can only carry 3 people. Tom, in a fit of either bravery or stupidity, the line is a fine one, decides to take Nat and Greg ashore and then go back for Tyler and Mealy. This means that these two will have to play temporary castaways on the wrecked jet ski. Despite their extensive knowledge of jet skis, which boils down to just turn the handlebars and rev it up, they try to fix the wrecked bike. But after many attempts to remove the engine cover and probably more than one caught finger, they decide that maybe they are not as handy as they thought. As the sun begins to set and there is still no sign of rescue, despite their attempts to signal with the cell phone light to shore, Nat discovers something worse than the possibility of being shark food. Tom and Mealy have been playing secret lovers. As Nat tries to process this betrayal, the phone falls into the water and Tom, in an attempt to save the latest episode of his favorite series, lunges for it. But wait, things could get worse. They discover that a great white shark has decided to join their party. Suddenly, infidelity seems like an insignificant problem compared to the possibility of becoming shark lunch. Hoping for the miracle to happen, Tyler remembers seeing a boat in the distance when they were enjoying their delinquent ride on the jet skis. Tyler, confident or perhaps desperate, decides he is able to swim out there and call for help. Everyone thinks it's crazy, but in the face of Tyler's determination and lack of options, they give in. After all, what's the worst that could happen? We already know how that ends. Please, if you're enjoying the video, show it with your incredibly valuable like. For you, it's just a second and it helps me a lot. Ah yes, the day was promising as Tyler splashed merrily on his way to shore. But of course, this is when nature decides to make its presence known, and the great white shark, with more hunger than a college student at the end of the month, begins to prowl. Tom, in an act that would earn him the title of clumsiest of the year, overturns the jet ski and turns the situation into a chaos worthy of a 5 o'clock soap opera. The shark, taking advantage of the free buffet, takes a bite out of Greg, which becomes the specialty of the day. Nat, for his part, has such a close encounter with the shark that they almost end up exchanging phone numbers. He manages to escape by the skin of his teeth, emulating Houdini. Tyler, who had almost reached the boat, receives a friendly visit from the shark. Night falls, and Nat, Tom, and Mealy, the three surviving musketeers, make a master of patience. They see a light in the distance, and Nat, in an act of bravery or stupidity, depending on how you look at it, challenges Tom to swim to the light source. Tom, more cowardly than a mouse in front of a cat, refuses, so Nat decides to do it herself. Nat makes it to the light, only to discover that it is in fact a buoy that some poor wretch used as a float before becoming shark dinner. On his return, it's Tom who decides to get off his butt a little and helps Nat up. At dawn, Tom and Mealy discover that their buoy was more like a floating sarcophagus, and in the absence of other options, they decide to do some marine DIY by improvising oars out of driftwood. The crew struggles on like a bunch of headless, aimless chickens. Their life has become a maritime version of A Day in Hell. However, the shark, which seems to have taken a Red Bull, returns angrier than ever. Tomas, who already earned a trophy for clumsiness, now adds a Medal of Honor to his collection with a leg injury that makes him limp like a drunken pirate. Meanwhile, the sea beast continues to lurk like an underwater stalker. And just when they finally think the worst part is over, reality decides to give them another slap in the face. That's life, my friends, always full of surprises. Imagine this. Poor Thomas, who was already closer to death than a character in Game of Thrones, ends up back in the shark's mouth. His torso becomes a plate of canapes for the shark, and his figure a canvas of agony and despair. On the other hand, Millie, the girl who from the first minute had confessed that she could no more swim than a stone fish, was about to get on the jet ski. But who said life was fair? That's right, folks. It was time to say goodbye to our dear Millie. Her fight had been a brave one, but in the end, fate played a trick on her. Meanwhile, Nat was more confused than a raccoon in a library. For one thing, Tom looked more like a zombie than a human, and all that remained of Millie was her rescue float. But this is when the screenwriter decides to give the plot a twist. Just that unusable float would provide the inspiration he needed. After opening the jet ski for the umpteenth time, he discovers that it was the gas line that had broken. And guess where he found a replacement? Bingo! In the float. It seems that sometimes the most useless objects can save your life. So with more courage than a Roman gladiator, Nat takes to the water, taking on the shark. The adrenaline could be cut with a knife. Despite ending up with his shoulder in tatters, he manages to get the tube on and fix the jet ski. After a couple of attempts and prayers to all the known gods, the jet ski came to life. It was time to get out of there. But of course, nothing can be easy in this story. The jet ski, still in trouble, was more exhausted than a marathon runner. And to top it off, the shark, who seemed to have a bottomless stomach, was back at it again. Tom, seeing the situation, decides it's time to make his big sacrifice. He says goodbye, apologizes for being a burden, and dives in, becoming the shark's final appetizer. One would think that after all that, the shark would be full by now, but oh, surprise, the shark comes back to try to bite Nat, but as luck would have it, he gets caught between some rocks. That allows Nat, albeit bruised and with more trauma than a Hitchcock character, to make it to shore. We don't know if the island Nat has reached is a paradise or the beginning of another nightmare. But the adventure doesn't end here. I'll see you in the next one. Let's go.